what has inner significance to us. Like, I love that one of like, what would make you weary to not say this? Like, what would kind of fuck you up on some level if you didn't express this thought, this feeling, and what you know about it from your life, from your experience, if you didn't say this.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the late night hour on Way of the Artist podcast.
Oh man,
I felt like I had to do it. Normally we do these kind of like afternoons that we record, but tonight we got a late night record session, and I felt like just like got to get that warm. Well, I hopefully kind of a warm sound to the night as we
just ruin someone's Wednesday morning.
Yeah. Oh God, no. Why did he do that? I love the show. I hate the intros. Hello, everybody. We're doing another one of another entry in our Artist Wisdom series, and we're going back to some ancient Greeks. It's like we did one from Socrates. I think the Socrates was like our first. It was like the first one that we did. And we haven't done too many of these, but here we are. We're back with the ancient Greeks because they had lots of great stuff to say. And so the quote in sort of not question, but the quote in exploration for our conversation tonight goes as follows: "The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance." Should I say it again? Sometimes it's always
do it
good
one
to
more
do.
time.
The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. And once more, that was a guy by the name of Aristotle.
Wow, it is late, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Full of gems like that all tonight. We're in for a treat, folks.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, something I'll start with. I'm reworking some of my writing, publishing a blog that's going to be coming out here in the fall. I guess technically it's already out, but it'll be more public. And something that I've been working a lot on with filmmakers. I talk about screenwriters a lot, but filmmakers in particular is trying to help people see that there's more to art than trying to like look good or look cool. Something I find this happens with writers a lot as well. And I'm sure with actors, I'm sure with musicians, although I know very little about the musician experience, but I've seen it with actors. I've definitely seen it with screenwriters, but I've seen it more, I'd say, even with filmmakers. And it's this kind of like, people get so impressed with what you can do with the camera and how you can do the lighting and how you can make things look and the razzle dazzle of effects and the visual, all of that, right? And I think what a lot of filmmakers miss as they're going about these wonderfully incredible technical skills they're developing is they miss that it's not so much about this outward appearance. It's actually about like where's that coming from, and like from for what purpose, for what reason. And I think that the reason partly why people don't do it is, one, they don't know, and that's fair. I understand that. So I'm bringing that to light. But secondly, people knowingly avoid doing it because it's sometimes uncomfortable. Because it means you have to back up your work. It means you have to think about it. And sometimes it means you have to feel things you don't always want to feel. And I think it's a unfortunate thing because you think you're getting away with it when you're doing it, but then when you get your final product or when you kind of move through the stages of it, you're like, well, why isn't anyone noticing my film, or why am I not winning the awards, or why didn't I get accepted to the film festival and that type of stuff? And it's like, well, because it's lacking a certain element that these things have that you kind of kind of dodged it. You know what I mean? So this quote kind of brings that up for me a little bit. It's like, the outward appearance, as beautiful and magical as that might be, it doesn't fool everybody. And I would say it actually fools a lot less people than you would think. Although I don't think that everybody who knows that something's off knows why it's off, but they just know it just doesn't have that depth. It just doesn't have something. And they couldn't put their finger on it, but they just know it. And it's like a feeling or a sense we have.
Yeah, I think that especially within something like film, one of the metrics that I have for that is, do you remember it? Did it leave any lasting impression on you? And if it didn't, then it's very often it's because it's lacking that genuine, that inner significance. It may have hit you with a ton of, razzle dazzle and special effects. It can deliver all kinds of other things, but it's all kind of ultimately forgettable. Like there's tons of especially in recent years, of giant blockbuster movies that had massive budgets that were I forgot about immediately after I watched them. Like other than to note that it's just like, oh yeah, I don't really remember anything about. I know I watched it. I couldn't really tell you anything about what happened in that story because it never really reached into me. It never really brought me to a certain place, and very often it's because the writer and a lot of the people who were piecing these things together, not that they didn't care. I don't want to say that these people don't care about what they're doing, but there is a certain, I'll make a generalization here, but there's a certain prioritization that has happened, and it's not the inward significance. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about how I recently rewatched Inception. And Inception is one of those movies where it's like, it's not, I wouldn't like, it does have an emotionally compelling story in it, though I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the highlight, but there's a very, there's a kind of gravity to that story, but it's also a movie that has all of this incredible, like, movie making, like everything that you would want, hope, expect for out of kind of like an action blockbuster. Like, that scene, that the sort of the infamous hallway fight scene in that is still so incredible. And I was like, when that movie first came out, I just remember everybody was just like, holy shit, that scene, that, like, it was spectacular, right? But it was like, it was all under this backdrop of these incredible, real human stakes that were going on. And it's one of those movies that even you rewatch it over and over and over again, and you pick up on more stuff. Like, and I find that the emotional elements that were built into it I pick up more and more of it all the time. It's like, it's a very real human story that's going on in this crazy sort of science fiction. Really, it is kind of a piece of science fiction, but there's all of this. So anyhow, I just in what you were saying, I was like, oh yeah, like this is for me kind of an example of something that had that inward significance, but is a film that people get caught up on the outward appearance of it, right? It's just like, oh, it's got to have all these crazy things and these insane action sequences and all this stuff, and it's like that's all just that all of that stuff comes out of that story about this guy who has this tragedy that happened to his wife and is just trying to get home to his kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like it
Yeah.
all of the crazy hallway fight scene, you know, comes out of that thing. You know, it's not the other way around, right? And one last thing to kind of wrap up this point, I'll hand it off to you. The screenwriting teacher and consultant Jeff Kitchen has like I think he calls it the who cares test.
The litmus test. Yeah.
Yeah. And he hears pitches from people, like he'll be brought in to like help work scripts that are in development too, in like major studios, from as I understand it. And you'll hear all these things like, oh yeah, like people are just like pitching all of like these crazy things and like all the stuff that happens. And then after hearing it, like he'll just say, okay, but who cares? Like, why do I care about all of this stuff going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like you haven't told me about the human element, which is so much of what, you know, which is the crucial thing about storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's still the fundamental part of storytelling, and it is a fundamental part of art, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So a couple things. One is, I mean, that is kind of the cornerstone of what I actually teach and share with people, is that it all begins with character. And I'm constantly amazed at how people just abandon that idea and forget that. And what you end up with when you do is you end up with a plot-driven story. And plot-driven stories, they suck. They honestly, they suck. They're very shallow and they're very weak. And name a plot-driven story that's actually any good. You'll fail to do it because they really don't work. Like, and it's fundamentally true. And the reason why is character is all that really matters at the end of the day. You can put it in any world. You can put it in any situation. Look at Star Wars. Who the fuck cares? Excuse my language. Who cares? And it's a Luke Skywalker and his sister and, you know, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? And his father. And like what the fuck's going on? And like, you know what I mean? Like, and then you had lightsabers and those are amazing. And you had the Force and you had all this other cool stuff. And that's all wonderful. But like,
and let's not forget Han Solo.
Oh yeah. I mean, Han Solo is amazing.
Great characters.
Yeah, great character.
Yeah.
Well, and like Han Solo, you know, just while we're on that topic, Han Solo is such a wonderful character because he's flawed. And I would argue that people love Han Solo so much because in spite of his flaws and his impediments and his limitations, he rises consistently above it. And he's really the underdog. He's a guy that should be fucking demolished. He has no fucking special skills. He has no powers. He can fly a ship really well. He's got a best friend that's a standing dog, Chewbacca. You know what I mean? Like, but there's something about Han Solo that we all kind of feel a little bit kindred to. You know what I mean? That we all feel a little bit the underdog. We all feel a little bit outmatched. And we all feel like, hey, you know, like, and the other thing about Han Solo, he's not perfectly good. He's not bad, but he's not perfectly good either. He's a little bit flawed. He's a little bit gray. He's, you know, but you put him in Star Wars, and that's why he's one of the most important, most iconic characters of all time. And so without him, you know, Star Wars is seriously handicapped in its ability to be as good of a story, right? So I always kind of try to remind people that, like, look, whatever your concept is, you build it around character. You don't really build character around your concept. Although sometimes you're going to have a great idea that has no character tethered to it yet, but it will be the character that will take what is really just a good idea and make it a great idea. It is the character that makes it great. The idea is not great on its own. I know this because you can actually write a story or make a movie with literally, like, really nothing happens in the visual realm, but it will be moving and it will be profound and it'll be powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say one last thing, because I mean, there was probably a few other things I could have gone off on, but I feel like I covered what I needed to. The other thing is I always try to remind myself of this one saying, and it was told to me many times, but it was like, they won't always remember what you say. They won't always remember what you do, but they will always remember how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we're talking about what we're talking about, it's that's the inner significance. They'll remember the inner significance. They won't always remember the shot and the visual and the event and the plot point, but they'll remember something about how it felt. And that might cause them to remember the literal event, but it was really because some feeling was agitated, aggravated, provoked, whatever you want to call it, inside. That's my take on that.
Yeah. And then it's like, with those kinds of movies, those kinds of films, and you rewatch them, and it's like, you can forget chunks of it, but when you see, you're like, oh, right, I remember the scene. And it's kind of like always with this, but it's like with this kind of this sense of delight, like it's, it has a quality to it. Man, I've never really thought about that, because I've heard you say that so many times as well, that like it's all about character, and it's the ones who's like, yeah, it's all about character. Like it's just, but it really is. And I think that, it's, I think it's because there's a certain demand that goes into that. Like, to develop character means you have to kind of dive into the muck a little bit. It means you have to dive into, again, a bit of that like unknown space, right? Because in storytelling and in any art, really, like we're dealing with, I will say that we're dealing with humanity and what it is to be human, what it is to be alive, what it is to exist. Like, I think that these things are really wrapped up in what art is, and why art exists to a certain degree is to try and express the unexpressible, and it's an impossible thing to do, but like the artist tries to get as close as they can to being able to say it, to say what cannot be said. In a nutshell. And so to that inner significance, and so in this example, like character, it's like, that means you have to dive into kind of an unknown, because you're talking about like one of the deepest mysteries there is, which is another human being. Like yes. we're mysterious enough even to our own selves. And then it's like, oh, what? I've got to really figure out another person. And it's, there's something demanding about that. I think there's something scary about that, overwhelming, about trying to take that on and to express it, communicate it. Because whereas plot, not that there's nothing artful about plot, because there absolutely is, but there's something where you can sort of like, you can figure out events, like they're a bit more simple. They're a little bit more straightforward, easy to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of, I think we focus in on those things. And then to the detriment of, the thing that actually makes us give a shit about those things, right? Why do we give a shit about those things? And that's really, I think it can be the intimidating thing, but it's also the most exciting part as well. Yeah.
So I heard this from Alan Watts, but I don't think it was Alan Watts directly who came up with this idea, although it's possible. But he, and you might have heard this one before, but it was something about, if you were to look at the universe, what would it look like? And the answer is a human being. Because basically the whole idea is that there's a whole universe inside of somebody, really, and it's just so infinitely vast that you would never even you would never even come close to grasping the entirety and wholeness of it all. And people are forever a mystery to us, no matter how well we know them, no matter how long we've known them. Um, there's always something to find out. And I mean, I've been friends for, 20 years, and it's like there's still stories, and we've talked about this before, but there's still stories that I tell you occasionally, and you're like, wow, you never told me that one yet. And like, it's not that I'm more interesting or more vast than the next person. It's just that, I'm very, very, very much involved with story, and storytelling is very much a part of my life. And so when I know how to tell a story. I know how to tell an event that's very boring and mundane in my life and make it interesting. Because when you become a studier of story, you begin to find interesting things in the mundane. That's the natural evolution of a storyteller. And I've come to find that because initially when you start as a storyteller, and here's a little bit of wisdom to throw out there, why not? When you initially start at storytelling, what you find interesting is the big things, the big events, the big fight scenes, the big car chases, the fight, the kiss, the massive shit, right? All the stuff that really, is obvious. But when you do this for a long time, you begin to see that there's powerful, untapped resources in the stuff that no one's looking at. And when you begin to notice this, some interesting things happen. You just see things that you never saw before, and also attributed with gratitude and appreciation, you can actually pull out great moments in life without realizing it. Like, for example, I've shared this story before about a girl that I was dating, and we were hanging out one afternoon, and we decided to make the perfect sandwich. And like when I tell the story, it sounds like a fascinating, incredible event. Like, it really does. Because when I tell it, it's like, yeah, but you guys made the sandwich and you had this thing. It's like, only because I saw it, only because I recognized it. And to be totally fair and honest, I don't know if I really even recognized how incredible that moment was until after the fact, which is quite often what story is like as well. Like the last thing you say to someone before they die might have been meaningless and unimportant to you in the moment, but then all of a sudden they're gone and you'll never get to say anything to them again. And all of a sudden you remember, this was the last thing we ever talked about. And somehow everybody hears that and they go, that's so important. Oh, wow, so amazing. But it's like, no, only in context. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so, it's inner significance, man, is a wonderfully incredible, important thing, and also should be something that I think the artist cares for. That yeah, it might be painful, yeah, it might be uncomfortable, but there's something beautiful and wonderful in it all at the same time. Like there's something beautiful and painful. It's not, and you kind of got it like. That moment of making the sandwich, let me just kind of say one more thing. That moment of making the sandwich, I could go back and live that moment over and over and over again, almost like a perfect heaven. And it's a shame that in the moment I couldn't appreciate it like I can appreciate it now. And there's pain in that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also beautiful. And that's what these inner significance kind of things are. They're kind of lovely and they're kind of hard all at the same time. They're very full. They're very vast. There's a universe in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
It's endless. Yeah.
I don't remember who had said it. It was but some person, very, very noteworthy person of history, was asked in an interview if they could go back in their life and change anything, what would they change? And she said, I wouldn't change anything. I would just pay more attention.
Mm. Well, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I would change things, Evan. I'll be honest. There are moments, but then I think, but that's also because I'm disconnected from something, because I always kind of come back to, no, it'd be better if I did.
Yeah. Well, and that's like one of those things where it's like, because that's a very common plot that comes up in any kind of film or story. We'll just say story in general. Any story about time travel, right?
Yeah.
People who have the ability to travel in time, and it's just like, it's almost always, you change anything, like you just mess things up even worse, because you change this little thing and then suddenly you come back and like all of these other things are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this sort of human realization that there's nothing that you could really ever want to change about what you did in your life, because you just can't. Like there's it means that you don't know the same people. Maybe it means you don't know something that you once knew. It means like there's so many implications behind it, and that's like one of those things that a story like that, again, is pointing to a kind of inward significance. And I think that's why those stories still resonate with us, and why like that's a theme that we continually continue to explore as a humanity. Just shifting gears for a second, I thought, oh yeah, into put a different art form metaphor into this. So in acting, and I know you heard this in class too, Brandon. I'm sure, if any actors out there have probably at some point heard a teacher say something like this, I hope. And if you haven't, well, here we go. But I remember teachers saying it all has to come from somewhere. Your decisions as an actor in the part you're playing, they have to come from something. Like not even very far off from the language that Aristotle used. It's just like it has to come from something real inside.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some reason as to why you are doing some of the things that you're doing as an actor in a performance. And I mean, I think that there is some nuance to be found in that, but you can often see actors who, and I rail on this all the time, but actors who just do something very strange and bizarre in their performance that makes you just kind of furl your eyebrows a little bit, like kind of cock your head to the side and just be like, what the fuck was that? Right? And that's usually one of those moments where it's like, that's an actor who wasn't coming from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That thing wasn't coming from anything real. That was coming from the ego of the actor trying to be interesting and trying to do something that they think will be interesting for the character. But it's not interesting for the character because it's not actually attached to the character in any kind of way. Right? Like it's just was sort of tacked on, like it's just a little thing and pinned onto it, and it just stands out, and you just go, what? Like you don't want anything to kind of stand out as an actor, like it all needs to just feel real and lived in, and when somebody watches you, like you're just this human being. And then you see an actor do some sort of weird tick, and you can see how conscious an effort it is that the actor is doing, to do this. And that's one of those things of, there's no inward significance, or if there is, they haven't explored it, and they haven't really realized it within themselves. Now, that's not to say that, because I've also heard acting teachers say things like, well, you can't say that line if you don't know why you're saying it. Right? I've heard that, and for the most part, I would agree, but I've also had the experience of discovering why I'm saying a line in the act of saying it in a performance. I've also, or like I've maybe had some very surface level understanding of what I was saying, or thought I understood why I was saying what I was saying. Well, and then in the moment that it comes out, because I was, really responsive and connected to what was happening in the moment, suddenly the words came out, and I was just like, whoa, holy shit. Like just like a moment of revelation on the stage of being like, I like this line has all of this new meaning all of the sudden. Like I've just hit the well, of the meaning of this line. So it's not always just a case of like you have to know all of it. I think that there is an element of sometimes you don't always know exactly why, but there has to be some component of there has to be at some level, I think, inside of you, because I think as actors need to work intuitively as well. I think actors can get trapped working too intellectually about things, and
I agree.
And they delegitimize that intuitive capacity of being like, well, I don't know why I have this physicality for this character or something, but it's just I can't explain it, but this is a part of them, right?
Yeah.
I'll be like, yay, that unless it reads as being unreal to me, I won't question it, right? Otherwise, I'll just be like, that's fascinating. You don't really know where it comes from. I don't really know where it comes from, but holy shit, is it working? And that's something to note as well. But anyhow, enough on that tangent. Brandon, it sounds like you have something to say.
Always do. Well, look, okay, let me, first of all, you're finding it out in the moment, like you don't know why you're saying it until maybe you're saying it in the moment. Here's something from just a screenwriting point of view, is that something I try to always remind writers of is that your characters don't understand themselves maybe as much as you do. And that's important to remember. I mean, like, we're not always all totally self-aware. And like, I mean, I had an example of this happen to me like just a couple of weeks ago, where someone did something or said something or whatever, and I kind of responded a little bit like, just to kind of give it the most brief way, is just kind of like, fuck you. And I thought about it later, and I thought about my response and the way I acted, the way I behaved and how I interpreted it. And I was like, well, maybe they didn't actually mean it like I interpreted it. Like they said it, but like I perceived it a way, but that may not be really what was going on there. And something that, like, when I was younger, like as a kid, young as a kid, like I had two older brothers, and I had like, my father was very dominant, and basically like everybody just kind of told me what to do. It's like, we're doing this, we're doing that, and I didn't really have a say, and I got bossed around, I got pushed around a lot. So I don't like that now as an adult, right? I don't like it when people tell me what to do. I don't like it when they say it's my way or the highway or any of that bullshit. It fucking pisses me off, quite frankly. And I really literally, like, because I'm a grown adult now, if someone says it's my way or the highway, I go, take the fucking highway. Like, that is my literal thought. Take the fucking highway. I'm fucking out. Don't ever fucking give me that. Like, never. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm not going to happen. But I might be interpreting it as my way or the highway. And really, they're not saying that, but I'm interpreting it that way. So my natural response, if I was acting in a scene and I interpreted it that way, and I said, fuck you, or whatever I say, or I say like, something else, but really what I mean is fuck you. That's fine, because it's true for what I think I understand in that moment. But then you're doing like, this happens in theater, and I know you've had this experience you're just talking about. I've had it too, where you're doing a play and you're doing the third night or the fifth night or whatever, and all of a sudden you get to that line, you say that line, but as you're saying it, it's not fuck you, it's I love you, and you're like, holy shit, I never realized what I was saying until right now. It's like your interpretation of it as an actor, it's true but profound, because it shocked you, because you didn't even know until you hit that moment. But I mean, like, I try to remind screenwriters of that, because screenwriters sometimes, actors, if they're really committed to their job, they have the luxury of being in the moment, whereas writers sometimes have too much time to think, and that can actually get in their way. And so I always try and encourage writers, like, just write the fucking scene. Just write the scene. Don't stop. Don't think about it. Don't edit it. Just let it unfold. Because when you sit there and you go, what could they say and what could be creative, you're trying to find outward significance. You're trying to dress it, right? Whereas like a lot of the time the character they don't have to say anything fancy,
Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way, and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft, available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe. Yeah, I'm just like, it's very interesting because I do think that, within most art forms, like most of these things kind of translate across, but it's just to different sort of effect, and they're there, but they operate a little differently. And I'm becoming aware of what I think is one of those situations, because it's not like, yeah, writers have that sort of luxury, I guess, luxury and curse of having a lot of time to sit around and think about it, and that can get in the way. But actors have the same problem with thinking too, because there's all this thinking that goes on, before the performance, off stage, true. At home, all of these things. And then they make the mistake of bringing all of that thinking onto the stage with them instead of just responding, and opening up to, the moment as an improvisation of not knowing what's going to happen. And it's like a little bit different because there's like a different fear it's not a different fear. How do I explain this? So for the writer, the scary thing is that you're kind of by yourself and you're working away on this thing, this thing that is this book, that is this screenplay. And then you eventually go out and you show it to somebody, right? And they will say, yeah, you've got something here. Or they will say, no, this is a bunch of nonsense. This is a bunch of drivel. And so that's like kind of the scare that's happening there. For the actor, it's like, the scare is still there, but it's like it happens immediately. It's like you're putting that thing up there and you're getting that feedback pretty like right away as to whether you're full of shit or not. It's not like this stored up bullshit, so that's kind of a side rant on the whole thing, but one that I felt like I needed to go on a little bit there. So thank you for letting me stumble through that one.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, like when because like I thought, like obviously thought there's something interesting that I think we're stumbling across here, and I'm going to ask you something in a second. But like, it seems to me that outward significance is a lot to do with us getting too much in our head, thinking too much, putting too much on it, trying to dress it up, and somehow make it more than what it is, not trusting what it is. Maybe thinking that, like, we're not being vulnerable, I think is ultimately what's going on there. So like when we're talking about like inner significance in art, like what do you think people should be looking to do that? What's your take on that?
Oh.
To like find that, because that's, I think we can all recognize, right? We hear it and we can recognize, yeah, okay, I get that. That's good. But what do I do now?
That is a big question. And I think in some ways it's one of those ones where the question is also the answer to a certain extent, is to ask that question, because I can't answer that for you. I can't answer that for another human being. I can, in some ways, I can't entirely even answer it for myself to a certain extent. But I am the only person I can look to in terms of anything that I'm creating artistically. That's just the question that I have to ask. Like, what is this really about? Right. And, like, I suppose you might point to, like, it's not that there aren't some things to think about and processes, techniques, etc., that don't go into this a little bit. Like, the thing that jumps to my mind right now is, in one of the first things I learned about screenwriting, is theme. Like, what is the theme of the story, as being one of the first things you need to answer for yourself. What the fuck are you trying to say in this story? Right? Because you don't even bother starting until you know what it is that you're trying to say. And that's not even the end of it, right? Because you can't just oh, okay, well, I'm trying to say that, it's like you can't, that's not a question that you can take a cavalier approach to. I mean, you can still play with it and have fun with it, but you have to be 100% fully sincere, sincere in every ounce of your body, sincere in asking that question, right? What is the theme of this story? What am I trying to say to the audience that will watch this, read this, right? That will engage with this, hear this. And that has to come from something, I think, just personally meaningful to you. And again, that's why it's like I can't answer that, but I can only encourage people to ask the question and really explore what has meaning to them. And there's so many things that could be of meaning to you. Like there's one thing that's always an interesting, and big questions are always great. Big questions are always great to ask in terms of discovering what's meaningful to you. There's all kinds of exercise that you can do in that regard, I suppose. One sort of exercise that I encourage people to do, I mean, journaling is fantastic in terms of getting to know a little bit of what you think and feel. But you can journal about, I encourage people to journal about really big topics, right? Write God at the top of a page and start writing all of your thoughts and feelings about what that is, right? Maybe you'll discover something about yourself. Maybe you will come to some clarity about yourself. Is there some kind of, what is it that you wish that the world did better? How did the world fail you in your life? Touching into those feelings in yourself can open up a wellspring of what has meaning to you. And suddenly you're just like, oh, I get it. The theme of this story is that violence is never ever justified, or something like that. Maybe that's just an example off the top of my head, right? But that maybe for you, that's how you feel. Violence is never ever justified, and now now you know what your story is about, and that has some personal significance to you, and that will help guide you through what you're doing. It will help to also inform your characters. It will, it will do all of these things. And because you're connected to it in a real way, not in a superfluous way, it can't just be a throwaway theme. It has to be a theme that actually you connect with, that you feel you have something to say. And actually, I know I'm talking a lot here, Brandon, but I'll try and wrap this up with one more thing. I did this terrific course that Rob Bell put out called, I think it was just called Something to Say. It was just like an audio course that he did. And for the most part, it was actually a list of questions. There's a lot of questions to ask yourself. And one of them was like, what do I have to say about this? What if I did not say this? Would I be weary for not? You know, like there's like there was more things than that, but like it was things like that to just kind of like get your juices going in terms of like, because those are all questions and ways of thinking designed to help us connect to something of our own inner significance. What has inner significance to us? Like I love that one of like, what would make you weary to not say this? Like what would kind of fuck you up on some level if you didn't express this thought, this feeling, and what you know about it from your life, from your experience, if you didn't say this, you know? And that's the kind of fire that I think, you know, you're looking to bring. Because if you're bringing your own inward significance to something, you have at least a hope of it coming through in your work. I mean, that there otherwise there's definitely no chance that you have that opportunity.
Yeah, bringing your own inner significance is vital, I would say. Well, to go back to theme, I mean, I have some opinions. So, like, let me say that I like what you presented as a theme option, like violence has no place ever, whatever, something like that. You said something.
I'm not even saying that I
no, I'm not. No, don't worry about that.
Agree with it, but you know, like it's.
But that's a good theme because it's an opinion that naturally has conflict, and here's why that's so important in storytelling. I mean, maybe this works in you know, for the musicians out there and other art mediums. Maybe you guys can find a parallel with this, but I'm going to focus on storytelling because that's my main one. If I say that violence has no place in society, the best movie or story I could write is how it does, because it naturally conflicts with my point of view. It creates incredible conflict in the story. The story is writing itself now. So if I actually explore where violence has a place, if I actually believe it never does, then I got a good story on my hands. I have the beginning of something really compelling and really interesting. And here's the thing. If I can prove that violence has no place, and I'm not going to virtue signal and do some bullshit like pretend that I'm good and whatever, but I'm really going to find out. And this means that like someone came along and murdered my child and raped my child and did horrible fucking things, and I just wanted to kill them. And the belief is violence has no place whatsoever. You know, what if that's true, right? Then I need to give the audience, and I need to actually explore that in the story, why violence and enacting, say, even vengeance in this scenario would be wrong, and why it would do more harm than good. And if I could bring people to an experience where they could see that, they might actually change their opinion. Because, you know, I would think that most people are not really sure either way. Violence has no place. Violence does have a place. We don't really know. Most of us don't really know. We'd like to think violence has no place, but then if you push someone far enough, you go, no. Violence is okay now. So what is it? Where is it? Where's that line? You know, it's all an exploration. And in storytelling, you know, you can really explore that with theme. So an example of a movie that I love is When Harry Met Sally. And one of the themes that it confronts is men and women can never be friends because sex will always get in the way. And is that true or is that not true? I mean, well, you can watch the movie and figure out what you interpret that to be saying at the end of the day. But it does explore that, you know, in a lot of ways, right? Like, and there's some interesting things about that, you know, like if sex is always getting in the way of real friendship, then what else gets in the way of real friendship? And if these things are in the way, can we really be friends? I mean, it goes beyond sex. It goes beyond like really a lot of things. But when we explore these arts and we explore these stories, maybe we want to find out if we're wrong, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe we have a belief or a thought, and maybe like we don't want it to be true. And so through story and art, we can actually explore it. I did this with one film that I did, and I've talked about it many times in the podcast, called Love Lost. And can you lose love? Can it be lost? Can it be lost forever and then you can never have it again? And I really deeply tried to explore that subject matter. And I mean, I didn't want it to be true, but I felt love loss. You know, I felt like it was just lost and it was gone. And, you know, and I had to come to a profound understanding of what love actually was to get through that story. And fuck, did I cry? Did I shed some tears and feel some pain and some anger and things through that experience? But what an incredible experience it was, you know? And that's really, theme is so much about that. I always tell, writers and filmmakers and stuff, people are telling a story, I always tell them, like, don't make your theme some bullshit. Like, my theme is love. Who the fuck cares? That's boring. That's generic. That's dumb. Like, that's nothing. Like, love is just too generic. But give it something. Love? Give it an opinion. Give it an angle. Give it a direction, right? And then there's natural conflict in it, right? Because, of course it's about love. Every story is about love, by the way. Every story. There's no story that isn't about love in some form. So that's not a theme. That's just, it's just a generic idea in the context of theme, right?
Yeah. And like, because like the question is like, okay, great. What about it? Tell me what you know.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, tell me what love. You know about love.
Yes.
Like, because I'm not interested in just some general thing about love. What do you know about love? What do you
inner significance?
Inner significance.
Yeah.
What do you know about it? I don't care about, it's kind of like that that great scene in Good Will Hunting where in the park bench, right, where Robin Williams confronts Matt Damon about saying, like, if I asked you about love, he even asked me, he's like, I asked you about love, you'd probably quote me some Shakespeare. If I asked you us, you would, like he would just, you'd probably tell me the history of the Vatican, or, I can't remember how it all goes, but it's just like, it's all secondhand, right? Like, he was basically pointing it out. It's just like your whole life is secondhand to a certain extent, right?
And then he shares something about inner significance.
Yeah. And then he shares something about inner significance. Yeah.
He talks about, just one thing that,
right?
His wife, and like hours, visiting hours don't apply to you,
Yeah.
Like, that's a real thing, where it's like, they're telling you to leave and you won't leave. That's a real moment, that's something.
Yeah. And that scene, like, I just got chills just thinking about that whole, that scene of like that whole speech that he gives, and like, again, that's a movie that left a mark on people, it left a mark on me. It left an imprint on me because it touched on some inner significance in myself, right? I think that's all it is. It's like, if you connect to your own and it resonates with the inner part, because when we really tell the truth about our humanity, like, it's like, I'm a guitar player, and I've said this before, but it's kind of an interesting thing. It's not just with guitar, but if you hit a string, a certain note, right? So like on a guitar, there's the standard guitars, 6 strings, and 2 of the strings in a standard tuning are tuned to E. They're tuned to the same pitch. And if you just hit one of them, you can actually see, if you look very closely, or you can just like put your finger on the other one lightly, and it's vibrating too. And it's like I'm you connect with your own inner significance, and you put that out there, and it resonates with someone who has that same pitch
Yes.
inside
That's
of
such a
them
good
too,
analogy.
right?
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I like that one. That's really good. Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Well,
I
that's
don't know
what's
if there's something else I wanted to say there, but yeah, just that great scene from Good Will Hunting.
But I think that's the thing, right? Is that that's what inner significance does. It vibrates into something that's not even been hit. You know, it like lands with you, right? Like I think when we talk about this Good Will Hunting scene, we're talking about something that it somehow resonates in both of us, right? I mean, it's not for everybody. I'm sure there's some people like, oh, whatever, but like a lot of people it resonated with because it hit on something that, like, I've never lost my wife to cancer or whatever happens to him. You know, I've never had that happen to me, but there's still something that it hits. It's still something I get about it. You know, there's still something about it that, you know, that resonates with me, as though it makes sense, as though it feels somehow real inside of me as well. And I think that's so much about what we're talking about, you know, is that's what art really does when it's done really well, is that it hits a chord in you that you might not even have known was there. And that's why you know it's true. That's kind of how you know it's authentic, because somehow it's you're picking up that vibration inside, and it's very hard to describe because you don't even know what's happening like half the time. It's just, you know, there, like I've talked about this a couple times, but there's a script that you wrote on the highway, and there's this moment in the story, and I would consider it probably the rock bottom moment of the story, or at least very near close to it, where one of the characters basically like nearly does himself in. And I just remember being like, oh, fuck. And it was like, shit just got real. Like, you got these guys just hanging out, they get to know each other, they're on an adventure, some things happen, it's fun, whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, could have died. And you all of a sudden you're just like, and it's just weird. It's just it's like it hits something on you. It's like about friendship and about life and whatever. And you might not even been trying to do that. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of resonance, right? And inner significance is you don't even know what you're doing half the time. You don't even know that you're hitting chords that you're hitting. And you know, I'm sure that I had that response, but I'm sure other people, if they read your script or experienced it, becomes the movie that it should be. You know, that it might hit them in ways that, you know, are not even, that are unique to even me, and that I would be, oh yeah, look at that. I never noticed that one either. But that's where inner significance kind of works. It works in that territory of kind of the indescribable. We talk about that a lot on the show. But that's what you miss out on when you try to like make things look pretty and you try to be cool. You know, you don't hit those chords, or you don't give yourself a chance to hit those chords. And that's why people just, they know it's not quite right. It's not quite there because it doesn't really vibrate with them. It doesn't vibe with them, you know, it doesn't catch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been interesting, like exploring this one. You know, I really enjoyed it, to be perfectly honest. I've really enjoyed the exploration of it. You know, and I feel like,
I'm sure we could probably carry on, but you know, the night is growing late.
The night is long and the morning early. No, but I mean, I think like, if anything, it's just encouraged me to double down on trusting trusting my own kind of process and, you know, these inclinations, I suppose. And not overthinking it, kind of like letting myself maybe, like let that moment speak for itself. I don't know how to describe this, honestly. I don't have the words. I don't even know how to say any more about that, but it's definitely encouraged me to worry less and trust more. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. I have some similar thoughts, but I think I might save them for my closing arguments. So let's do a quick beer talk here.
Okay.
So I am drinking a beer it's a peach creamsicle.
Oh, I've had that one.
Have you had it? From Dead Frog Brewing in Langley, British Columbia. And it's good. Like I got like 4 of them. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. And they're good. They're good. But they're kind of like a lot.
Yeah.
At the same time.
It's kind of like a dessert almost.
Almost, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
They really do kind of have a peach creamsicle kind of a vibe to them. Like they really do. So they've certainly succeeded in doing that, and I have enjoyed them. It's not my absolute kind of favorite, but it's yeah. I applaud that. Maybe the problem was that they succeeded more than I thought that they would.
Well, I mean, it's probably one of those beers. It's like, it's nice. It's like certain beers I find they're a good one-off here and there, and that's, I think, why they're designed. They have that kind of quality to them. And hey, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm having this is not craft beer at all. But honestly, I grabbed a beer and I didn't even look. I'm just like, oh, that's a white can. Grabbed an Old Milwaukee. So anyway, to give them credit, it's still a really good, tasty light beer. I actually enjoyed it quite a lot during this talk. Simply great tasting, well-balanced, smooth drinking beer. That's what they put on it. I honestly would agree that it's pretty much that. I haven't had a lot of Old Milwaukees in my life, if I'm fair. I know it's a quite common, highly commercialized beer. But yeah, no, it's been good, man. It's been a good, nice light beer. And you know what? I can always appreciate a nice light beer every now and then. They're easy.
Yeah.
And honestly, now that I've kind of been into this one, I could see myself having a bunch more very easily because it's just so smooth,
Yeah.
Smooth and easy to drink. So there you go. Okay, well, final thoughts, man. Well, maybe you wrap it up first, and maybe I'll.
Yeah, sure. And I will say, at one point in history, Old Milwaukee would essentially have been a craft brewery. They would have had humble beginnings once upon a time.
Yeah.
Before the commercial became the commercial juggernaut that they are now. All right. So my
1934, by the way.
1934. There you go. Pretty much like right after Prohibition ended.
Yeah.
So yeah, good old Aristotle talking about this one, the outward appearance, the inward significance, and yeah, there is some of what you were saying in terms of just trusting more is really something that I'm taking away with this, and I hope that everyone else takes away from this conversation. Because I think at the heart of this, in many ways, for every artist out there, is that you have something inside you that, in fact, you have many things inside you that are worth sharing. You don't need to look so hard at what other people are doing and because we can get so easily dazzled by seeing what other people do, and we delegitimize our own experience, our own voice, what we have to share. So again, like, what do you have to say in these things? It doesn't matter. Maybe, I'll jump back into sort of like the filmmaking thing again. It's like, maybe you're a screenwriter and, you're not really a sci-fi writer, but sci-fi is really in. And, and I'm against people having careers and making money at doing something that they love doing. You can do those kinds of things. You can work in those kinds of ways. They say like, okay, I'm gonna do a piece of science fiction. Okay, great, but don't do it just by saying like, okay, this is what everyone else does, so I'm just gonna do kind of a variation of what other people have done and are doing. That's not fucking interesting. Maybe science fiction isn't your genre. I'm interested I'm actually in some ways more interested to know what your perspective on science fiction is than anybody else. Because you might have something fresh to bring to it, and you will only connect with that. You will only bring that if you can drop all of that fucking noise and bring something of your inward significance to whatever this story is. Doesn't matter if it takes place in, in outer space. There's still something underneath that whole thing that you have that will bring me in. So not getting caught up in those the aesthetics of things, and trusting that our voices have value, and I know this isn't anything new. How many people have given the advice and wisdom to, you've got to let your voice be heard. You've got to express your voice. We need to hear your voice. We do need to hear your voice in the medium, like your real voice. Stop judging it as not being enough, as not being interesting. As Stanislavski said, you are more interesting than the greatest actor who ever lived. He's a great acting teacher for those who don't know, but and director and all those things. But that there's a real place of wisdom there. You have so much in you. We are wise to not devalue it, and we are wise to express it as fully and as truthfully as we possibly can.
Well, I think it's good that we've gone into people understanding that what's significant to them and their own personal experience and their opinions and their perspective, that it matters, because it does. I think it's a really important element in art, the artist themselves bringing something to the world that's true for them and real, and sometimes, actually maybe even more than sometimes, maybe quite often, not even known to them until they actually venture down that path to look into it. To go back to the quote, and just kind of something I noticed about the quote was, it says, the aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. And I think that something about this that kind of dawned on me was like, if you're going to explore something, look beyond how it appears to be. Look into it. Try to find something inside of it that's significant, not just what it looks like. And an example that kind of came to mind, I'm teaching a class right now, and we're talking about character. It's a new class. And some great people, but like everybody struggles. And we were talking about the Breakfast Club, and we're talking about the characters, because the Breakfast Club is almost the perfect example of this. You got the jock, you got the criminal, you got the beauty queen, you got all these characters, right? And they're all these like labels, these like ideas of people. But then as you go into the story and you get to know them, and you hear who they are, you find out that they're not just their labels. Like there's something about them all that actually is very, like, there's a lot of humanity that connects all of them, and they all kind of become, spoiler alert, but they all become kind of like new friends, very unlikely, but new friends. And just to share one of their stories, is the story of the jock character, and he talks about how he bullied this kid and what he did to him, and how he thought it was funny for all his friends. And then he shares the story with these guys in this detention they're in, and he talks about his father, and he talks about what it would have been like for this kid to have to go home and tell his father what happened to him. And he's projecting like how much that would have been weak for him and what his father would have done and how that would have been looked at. And you start to see this kid that was really bullied by his father, the same way he bullied this kid. And you start to see that this isn't really him. This isn't really the guy underneath the image of this jock. He's actually a good kid that cares and feels, and he's had to put all that aside to try to be the part, play the role, do the thing, right? And I think there's something about every one of those characters we can relate to, right? Every single one of them. And I think that's why that movie is just so iconic and memorable. And if you haven't seen it, I highly encourage that you do. It's one of my favorite films ever made. But that's a great example of the inner significance, that there's so much more going on than meets the eye. Now, you don't have to write The Breakfast Club to do this. You might have a character that's a jock in your story, and maybe you're writing some superficial seemingly type of movie, some horror movie, and it's got the jock character in it. But like, find the inner significance in that character. Find the thing about them that they're not just a jock. You know what? And like, you on the other end of this, right? There's an idea of who you are, but you're not just that. Right? Like Evan kind of pointed out, like what you think and how you feel and your perspective, it all matters. And so in your art, you find this in yourself, but also find it in the art that you're doing too. Like, don't just judge a book by its cover. Open it up, look into it, try and find something in there that's more to it than it appears to be. And I think wonderful things will happen for you.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.